Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about GitHub hosted runners and the new generally available feature of Azure private networking capability. Now this feature has been requested for a long time and it's here today for you. This feature allows you to run your actions workflows on GitHub hosted runners and connect securely to your Azure private networking. And this will connect to any of your Azure resources that are configured in a private vNet. And this can include things like Azure storage accounts, Azure container registry, or maybe things like APIs or an artifactory. So let's dig into the new features. Let's have a quick look at the architecture diagram that shows us how GitHub hosted runners interact with Azure vNETs. To enable communication between GitHub's networks and your vNet, a GitHub hosted runners network interface card deploys directly into your vNet. When a GitHub Actions workflow is triggered, the GitHub Actions service creates a runner. The runner service deploys the GitHub hosted runners network interface card directly into your Azure vNet. The runner agent picks up the workflow job, the GitHub Actions service then queues the job. The runner sends logs back to the GitHub Actions service. The network interface card is able to then access your on-prem resources. You can enforce your network security policies on any existing or new networking policies, such as NSGs or firewall rules. You can also enforce these security policies and outbound access rules on the runners to reduce data exfiltration risks. Because security is front and center, you can isolate the build traffic from the public internet and route it through your existing private network connections, whether that's a VPN gateway or an express route. And you can easily monitor traffic for any malicious or unusual behavior as your workflows are running. So let's get started in how we configure GitHub hosted runners with Azure private networking. We're now going to get started with an Azure resource that is located in a supported region. In that region, we have a private vNet configured for this Azure resource so that it does not have access to public internet. Just note that when you go to execute your GitHub hosted runner, make sure you're using a supported region. We have those listed in our documentation, which I'll highlight below. Also note that Azure Private Networking also supports GPU hosted runners in various regions. You can also now get support for ARM runners in various regions as well. Currently, we can see that we've tried to run a GitHub Actions workflow to our Azure storage account. The workflow is going to fail because that storage account is sitting on a private network without access to the public internet. So we're going to go ahead and configure our GitHub hosted runner to connect to our storage account using that private network. To get started configuring the networking, GitHub's going to provide you with a bicep file that gives you all the inbound and outbound rules that you need access to for your network security group. This is provided for you in the bicep file. You'll also need to obtain the database ID for your enterprise. We've provided the script so you can easily follow along. Once you obtain those prerequisites, you'll then need to use the script that we've provided to configure your Azure resources for Azure Private Networking. In our documentation, we've provided you with a script to get started. This bash script is easy to copy and paste into your Visual Studio Code or IDE environment to execute against your Azure resources. First thing you'll need to do is set your environment variables. You'll need to set your Azure location, subscription ID, the resource group name, the vNet name, subnet name, network security group name, the network settings, and your database ID. Now just note, when you are using the default values, make sure they don't conflict with any existing IP address ranges that you have in your existing Azure network. Once you've configured everything for your Azure subscription in the prerequisites, you then want to go over to your GitHub repository and start beginning the configuration there. Now this existing workflow file that failed is doing a very simple deployment of a GitHub Actions workflow. It's logging into Azure and uploading some files to our blob storage. Notice it's using an Ubuntu hosted runner. Now we're going to configure our GitHub hosted runner to access that private virtual network in Azure. We're going to go to the top right of our screen, click on our icon, scroll down to our enterprises, and then we want to go down to our hosted compute networking configuration. From our hosted compute networking configuration, we want to select New Network Configuration. Scroll down to Azure Private Network. From here, you'll configure the network configuration by entering a configuration name and then adding an Azure Virtual Network. Note that when you ran that deployment script, it outputted an ID. This is the ID that you'll need to put for the network settings resource ID located here. It will then fill in the resource name, the Azure subscription ID, the virtual network, subnet, and all the other networking configurations that you need. After you configure that new network configuration, you will need to go ahead and configure a runner group. You're going to go to your Actions policies and select New Runner Group. You're going to go ahead and give that runner group a name, give it organizational access, workflow access, and select the network configuration that you'd like to use. Once the runner group is created, you want to go ahead and create a new GitHub hosted runner to add to that runner group. When you go to create that new runner, note the runner specifications of what is now supported. While we do support Linux and Windows, we also now support ARM. You can choose the size of the runner that you'd like to use, also support large runners. You'll want to assign the permissions to the runner group and also make sure that the networking is configured, and then you're good to go. Now that we've reconfigured our workflow file that specifies which GitHub hosted runner group to use, we can go ahead and rerun the workflow. We can see that our workflow has ran successfully, showing that we are now able to successfully access a GitHub hosted runner into our private network in Azure. Thank you all for joining today. We've put links in the description so you can get started right away.